Hello, and thank you in for your first trip into the Thought Vessel. I'm Levi Perry, and today with me are my two hosts. First up, our representative from the plane formerly known as Mirrodin, Jacob the Phyrexian.
Hello.
And our third host is none other than Dr. Jenkinstein himself, Joe Kilcar.
Hello, I'm ready to sow as many chaos seeds as I can.
Only if we fix you first.
No.
All right, now it'd be rather rude of us to get into the topics of the day without first introducing ourselves, so I'm going to go ahead and start us off. My name is Levi. I started playing Magic around 2011. I do love this game, and especially Commander, because it's a way to design and play at however you want to. So if you wanted to be super chaotic, if you wanted to be spiky, if you want to build a deck where everyone's in a chair, you can. And it gives you a lot of flexibility, and it's almost a perfect game in that manner. My favorite playstyle personally is blink effects. I always like creating a bunch of creatures that come in with doing something right out of the gate and then doing it again and again and again. So naturally, my favorite colors are the glorious Azorius, which is blue and white.
Hi, my name's Jacob. I've been playing Magic since 2000. Things I enjoy about the game are getting to interact with other players, having conversations over the table, and really just the community aspect of the game more than a lot of the specific intricacies, though I do like those. My favorite playstyle is I am our weird residential storm player. I like to sling dozens upon dozens upon dozens of spells, and then when I'm not doing that, I am going very wide with a billion people of armies, as is the nature of needing to be spellslinger and the big numbers. We like to be in teamer, so we're the classic green, blue, and red.
And of course you have Joe Kilcar. I started playing Magic around the same time as Levi, though not in the same area. I enjoy this game because of just the intricacies of the mechanics in between cards. And because of that, one of my favorite playstyles is, in fact, Jank. You will see me playing quite a few different kinds of jank, such as one creature prismatic bridge, giving every single player at a table a wedding ring, or just playing decks that have nothing other than the theme that it's trying to do. Thank you, Enchantocrats. My favorite colors because of this, because I don't like being limited, is Wooburg. I dabble in all colors.
Bit of a cop-out, but okay.
It's not, though, because, trust me, you need to.
I guess if we were to really slow it down and went with like what Levi did here and did two colors, I would probably slim myself down to Simic. What would you choose for your two favorite colors?
Oh, I'm Is It All the Way.
There you go.
Yeah, Is It All the Way.
So, and I guess we cover a good variety of spectrums, I think, between the three of us when it comes to the different type of approach we're going.
I mean, we've all just kind of broken down that we're all blue players, but in one extra color.
Well, I definitely agree with that, but my particular reason for playing blue is more aligned with white, but needing the extra support. So it's more methodical, going to get there eventually, not very explosive, but just kind of building up the army that you're going to see coming. Where Jacob's gonna be more of a really gonna punch you in the face. Sometimes it's a little bit out of nowhere, but does do a lot of Timmy type things, and yours is just more on the chaotic side of the blue. So blue is very flexible.
If blue wasn't required for me to sling 100 spells as an additional color, because adding red does not do that for that pair, I would probably be in the red spectrum.
Yeah, and that's certainly fair. Out of the three of us, I'm the only one that made the mono blue chaos deck.
Proud of you.
That's fair. And we will get into chaos in later episodes here. But kind of jumping in, the next topic of the day is going to be, Am I the Arch Enemy? So this is where we go online and we find the Am I the Arch Enemy type Magic the Gathering topics. We're going to take a look at them, dive in, dissect, and determine, is that person the Arch Enemy? Joe, can you read it for us?
Certainly. Am I the Asshole Magic the Gathering edition? Note, I'll try to keep this story as short as possible. Sorry if this is a little long. I'm in my mid-20s and have been playing Magic for about 6 years, mostly Commander, but also competitive Standard and Draft. Recently, I wanted to start playing Legacy. I put together a Legacy deck, Demir Doomsday for anyone curious to know, but I also have a mono red super budget burn deck, and played some games at an LGS I don't usually frequent. At the LGS, I met a player in his 30s. We'll call him Dave. Dave has been playing Legacy for several years. Dave and I hit it off quickly. We played several unsanctioned Legacy games. They were very fun games that were close, some down to the wire. We played at the LGS for a couple of weeks. Eventually, Dave and I became friends. We exchanged our contact information and made plans to play some 1v1 Legacy games outside the LGS. The next weekend, I invited Dave over to my place for some Legacy games over beers. We played about 10 games. They were very interesting games that were competitive and mostly down to the wire. I ended up winning 7 out of 10 games, and we both had a lot of fun. We wanted to take a break from Magic, so we went out to get some lunch. Over lunch, Dave asked me how long I've been playing Legacy, and I told him only about a month or two, but that I played Magic for about 6 years or so. He was surprised and asked me how I put together a Legacy deck so quickly. I made a joke about what I do for a living because most players aren't able to throw together a $4,000 deck so easily. I told him that I was a little hesitant to mention this at the LGS, but my cards weren't real Magic cards, but were passable proxies that were virtually indistinguishable to the unskeptical eye, especially when the cards were double-sleeved and that my deck actually only cost about $100 put together. Dave reacted very harshly to this information. He said that I deceived him, that I was a cheater, and the victories I had weren't legitimate because I played with illegal cards. He said he was very disappointed in my actions, especially because he thought he had made a new friend he was able to have fun and competitive Legacy games with. He said it wasn't fair for me to have the same experience as him and other Legacy players without actually earning it. He also judged me and said what I was doing was illegal and that he didn't want to play any more games with me unless I played with real cards. I told Dave I didn't mean to make him upset, and I only played with passable proxies because I can't afford to build a Legacy deck with real cards. I also told him that winning or losing in our games had nothing to do with me cheating, and the passable proxies I was playing with in no way impacted the outcome of the games we played, with a mechanical gameplay perspective, i.e., if my cards were real, I wouldn't have done any better or worse. I told him that we did play fun and competitive Legacy games, and we can continue to do so. Dave was still upset. He asked me why I didn't mention that I was playing with proxies when we first met. I told him that it didn't seem like relevant information because we weren't playing in a tournament and that I was worried if I disclosed that, people at the LGS wouldn't want to play with me. He acknowledged that if he knew I had fake cards from the beginning, he wouldn't want to play with me, and that many but not all Legacy players at the shop, especially the owner, would agree with him. After talking him down, Dave said he wouldn't tell the others at the LGS, but that he would tell everyone if I tried to play there again. He also reiterated that he wouldn't play with me as long as I continued to use fake cards unless I made a commitment to acquire the real cards within the next couple of weeks, which I absolutely can't afford. Questions. Am I the asshole for initially playing unsanctioned casual Legacy games without disclosing my cards were proxies? 2. Would you consider my actions as cheating?
There's a lot to unpack there.
No kidding.
So the first thing I noticed about that conversation is out of the gate, he was saying that he didn't actually disclose to anyone that his cards were not legitimate, but people were under the impression that they were. And if it was high enough quality of cards that he was acquiring as the proxies, where you couldn't tell the difference, I think we're getting to the point of proxy versus counterfeit.
I think there's a nuance here to consider. The first thing being is that it sounded like the gentleman made a very active point to say, I would not do, like, I wasn't in a sanctioned event. The purpose of this was to play for fun. And it begs the point of relevance, whether if you go to a competitive, if you were choosing to do like a tournament setting, I feel like this am I the asshole would be a lot more cut and dry than it is.
Yeah, and especially with your point of proxy versus counterfeit, you would use those terms very differently for different situations because proxy means that you are just trying to use the type of card it is, not try to sell it to somebody, which is what the counterfeit would be used in that situation. As far as them not playing with him in that, that's real rough behavior. Like, yeah, he should have absolutely said that these were proxy cards, full stop. But the backlash that he got saying that they just would not play with him at all is very gatekeepy and just like a hurt for their format.
Well, it was above that. He said, he would tell everyone at the shop, including the owner, that he was using counterfeit cards if he didn't actually purchase the cards. And, not everyone has $4,000 to put down on a legacy deck. That is beyond unreasonable. If you're just trying to, especially he's just diving into the format, he might not even like it.
Yeah, it is beyond gatekeepy to try and do that, especially for a format that is so hard to get into, like Legacy.
And in addition to that, something I feel isn't really considered is the gentleman may have taken everything the way he did and was sour, because in the post it talks about the fact that the person with Proxies won 7 out of their 10 games and typically mechanically was doing better than this person, and there could be a potential slight or imagined or otherwise being felt by this recipient who's like, well, I'm going to slight you back by hitting you where it hurts and making sure you can't play around me or any of the people.
Yeah, I'm really hoping that wasn't the case, but that is something that very well could have been. I mean, at this point, we're only seeing one half of the story, so I would be curious if the Dave were able to go into the comments and let us know kind of their side of things, but I don't necessarily think it's cheating because you're not in a sanctioned event. I mean, I would definitely try to get proxies that are a little bit more clear that they are, in fact, just being used as placeholders, even if you don't have any intention of getting the original card. Because, let's face it, this is an expensive hobby that we have here. Like, this isn't something that not everyone can play, and that's a very serious point of contention moving forward because, as this game gets older, we have people that are going, are playing in high school and everything. If they can play Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Pokemon or even Lorcana for cheaper, why are they going to pick up Magic the Gathering if they just simply can't afford it?
Yeah, it's such a rough situation, and like just losing friends over something that they should have just been bonding over, and maybe even just opening up the discussion of why these cards are so expensive in the first place, got way too turned around. Like one of the comments of that post was especially talking about, it sounded like because he won 7 out of 10, he just was salty that he just didn't have the skills to put in. And that's not a reason for misplaced anger.
Yeah, that's where I was sitting on the first point I was trying to make. There's also something to be said about people not always initiating a very good, quick, dirty pregame conversation. Like, hey, just so you're aware, either a vibe or a this is what's going on. My deck is Proxies, quick and dirty.
Well, even then, like outside of Commander, which is a multiplayer, and you kind of have like multiple people that you need to sit down and see what everyone's about. This is Legacy, which is primarily 1v1, and not as many people will sit down for a conversation for 1v1 because it's 1v1. You're only really going against each other, and the ban list for like Legacy is already known about. And not many people are going to be saying, I don't want to play this type of deck or this type of deck because it's Legacy. You're just going to find powerful decks.
That's fair. I was, I guess, more trying to instill the idea of, I'm not necessarily tell them your strategy, but be upfront about like, hey, I'm new to Legacy. This is a deck I've constructed that's not all real. We're in an unsanctioned setting. Because if you go to a sanctioned, I feel at that point, if you put prize support on the line, there is always going to have to be a stigma of if you don't put skin in the game because this is a sanctioned event to earn rewards, that is the moment where this person's actions are justified.
And even then, there's been a push to have even sanctioned events for prize support that are allowing proxies, like the Playing with Power CDH tournament. Our close game shop is actually doing a Legacy proxy event for prizes.
That reminds me, I actually plan to play in that one.
Hey, Mazel Tov.
Only because it's proxy friendly and it's said out the gate that, hey, everyone be aware, entering this tournament, we are allowing these. Had that not been established beforehand, I'd never would play Legacy because I don't have the money for that either.
Oh, yeah, no.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, anything we can do to make this game more affordable is just going to help and strengthen the game down the line. So having proxy sanctioned events is great. And then it seems like this is just more of a casual pickup situation. So I don't think you were the arch enemy in this situation. I do think you should have communicated a bit better. Just letting people know, like, hey, this is proxy, especially if you're just doing pickup games at a local game store. I think you definitely should communicate that, but I don't think that you were the arch enemy here.
Yeah, no. I actually think that the Dave character and like that entire game shop just being gatekeepy is like really bad.
To be fair, as far as this conversation, we're getting the perspective of it sounded like only the Dave got to voice their opinion and they said everyone would agree with me and he never got to question the shop or the other
That's
players.
true.
That is also true. And also on a different note, we actually don't even know if this guy net decked because he didn't say that he like got his cards very specifically. He just said that he had a deck with him.
Yeah. And I think with that as well, which is interesting, is that he said that he was going to a local game store that he doesn't normally frequent. So I'm kind of curious if this is more like a city location where he can just simply go to a different LGS that's near him, or if he just needs to have a talk with a shop owner like, hey, I love playing this game. I have a legacy deck. This is, casual environment, but I don't have $4,000 to put down for a deck. And I don't really think that we're in a hobby that should require someone to have a car payment, like a down payment on a car just to be able to play effectively. All right, moving on to the next topic today. We have what we call our great pet card battle. So each of us are going to go head to head, and we're going to have a debate of two of our pet cards, and our third person will be the judge to see who wins. Round one we have today with me with my wonderful Trigon Predator versus
Me
Jake with...
and my amazing Guardian of the Gateless.
Very good.
Let me just go ahead and pull those up. I should have had this on hand in the first part, but, it's fine.
It's
We're
okay.
doing it
Scuffed and
live.
post. Scuffed and post.
No, we're keeping it in. We're doing it live. All right. So I have Trigon Predator. Trigon Predator, for 1 green blue, is a 2/3 flying beast creature. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may destroy target artifact or enchantment that player controls. And Guardian of the Gateless is for 4 and a white, a 3/3 flying angel creature. Guardian of the Gateless can block any number of creatures. Whenever Guardian of the Gateless blocks, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each creature it's blocking. I forget the name of that mechanic. Like it's a keyworded mechanic. I think it's like Rampage or something.
Rampage is the reverse.
Ah.
Rampage is when you attack with a creature with Rampage. Let's say they have Rampage 1, because it is a numbered keyword.
Yeah.
I don't know if it'd be a general keyword. I know flanking is, creatures get -1/-1 if they're blocking.
It's a really old keyword, like close to the outset of the game old.
I would have to look that up to know what that is, but
Yeah,
that sounds funny.
I know it's a keyword.
Okay. We'll have to look that up later. That'd be interesting. I'll go ahead and start us off here. So Trigon Predator. Of course, it has a lot of versatility. I am huge in my versatility here. So I love having the ability that if there's a particular player that has a problematic artifact or enchantment, you can go ahead and swing that direction, take that out. Or, always having a flying blocker in the world of dragons and angels and sphinxes is always a good thing to have to hold back as well. I like having that on a body so I can continuously do that if someone is becoming a consistent problem for me. And I like having that on a creature that has that evasion. So there are times that there'll be flying blockers that you can kind of get around. But in this situation, most of the time, it's just going to fly over. Hey, let me go take care of this, problematic artifact that's on the field. Maybe it's a stacks piece. Maybe it's just a ramp spell that's out of control. Whatever you need to do. I just think that it can answer a lot of different questions. And also, very, very budget friendly. Slides in the deck. It's only a three drop. Has that 2/3, so it's harder to kill than you would normally expect it to be. So I just like having that as a kind of a source of spot removal, a little bit slower, but it's a pet card of mine.
Yeah. The Guardian of the Gateless has been a favorite card of mine since I used to play a lot of the generic modern formats back in high school. I love this card. The fact that it has flying, it might be a little higher on your cost, but you get so much out of a 5-drop. Being able to block an entire board state and possibly murder their entire board state because they chose to swing out at you and they forgot that Guardian of the Gateless gets huge, and every 1/1 they send your way is just lambs to the slaughter, is a phenomenal feeling. Just the idea that you can generate this 3/3. It's got flying, so it deals with evasive creatures. It can deal with any creatures on the ground. It doesn't stop a lot of those, little nitpicky things like shadow. It doesn't stop unblockable, which is kind of sad, but it's a good catch-all net for an entire board state in one creature card. You don't have to have 30 blockers for 30 saprolings. You don't have to have, a giant mountain of dudes just because one guy decided doubling season was really, really cool today. You just put this boy down and suddenly that entire board state looks at one creature and goes, oh no.
Oh, yeah. So it's between the Trigon and Guardian of the Gateless. That's some tough decisions because on the one hand, we got some pretty good removal. But on the other hand, we got a cool blocker.
It's really the, I guess, objective difference between a great offensive card that has some utility and a wonderful defensive card with not very versatile at all.
Okay. I mean, me, being the jankiest among us, absolutely would love Guardian of the Gateless. I also run way too many enchantments and artifacts. But man, like my initial gut reaction is Guardians of the Gateless, only because of how cool that card is. It's so dumb, but so cool. He's so dumb, but he's so cool.
It's such a beautiful, and if you give it vigilance, suddenly it's an all taker.
Oh man, that's crazy.
But if we were talking strictly what is better,
Yeah, no,
Trigon 100% is better.
100%. Like, this is not a diss on Trigon. This is flavor pet card win. Trigon is much better, and you should always put it into your decks more often than not.
But that being said, as I sit here on Phyrexia, this is a hit piece on Trigon Predator. Me and my boys always run Guardian.
That is fair. Moving on to round number 2. We have Joe up with his Teferi's Puzzle Box, and I have my Dawn Charm.
All right, so Teferi's Puzzle Box is a 4-costed artifact. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player puts the cards in their hand on the bottom of their library in any order, then draws that many cards. One bit of rules that is left off of that card is you do still draw your first card for the turn. So that is in fact added into the hand total. It does not skip your draw step. Dawn Charm is a 1 instant. You choose 1. Prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. Regenerate target creature. Or counter target spell that targets you. Man, going spicy with the white counter spells there. Oh, hey. So Teferi's Puzzle Box has been one of my all-time favorite pet cards to put into decks because I use it primarily as draw to get through my deck. I usually don't run any kind of hate pieces to make sure that like nobody has their hand after the fact, unless I'm in CDH, in which case that's fair game. That's the whole point. But the fun and chaotic energy that just has Teferi's Puzzle Box not being able to plan a hand for anyone is just it's just the games that I love to go for because they are anyone's game at that point. There is no structure to that game. Literally, any single person at that table could then just get the win off of their hand. And I believe in those kinds of games, even if I'm not the one winning. And that's the main reason why Teferi's Puzzle Box is my pet card.
And I guess my response here is chaos sometimes wins games, defense wins championships. As far as Dawn Charm, I guarantee you in a game, there is not going to be a time in which you either need to fog the board, which when we're in a format right now that everyone's trying to build up to a massive army, and a lot of times they're trying to win off of one foul swoop, and just having a fog effect that someone did not see coming, and if they overextend and you can win off of that, it's only 2 mana, so it's not something like Arachnos Genesis at 3 or Ink Shield at 5 that you would need to hold up a significantly larger amount of mana to do. If there's a board wipe and you have a commander or some kind of creature that's essential to your strategy, being able to regenerate and just keep it around for longer, especially in a Voltron strategy. And then also, the countering a spell that targets you has come into favor for me more times than you would expect. So having all 3 of those on one card and you can use any of them and it's instant speed, for me, I don't think it's played enough because they're all solid altogether, but the versatility for me, it is a beauty of a card.
Oh, yeah, I actually had that in Shadowborn Apostles.
Oh, absolutely.
These are both really good points. I'm kind of feeling, because I get to see you quite often use Teferi's Puzzle Box. It's a good little catch-all card. I'm kind of rooting for this Dawn Charm, though. I did not know that the target spell that targets you thing was tacked onto that. I thought it had a different effect for its third part. That has to be one of the most hilarious things, just fighting mono white. You got 3 mana up, you hold up, they go to do this really amazing thing. You mana type them, they go, haha, only white counter spell. They counter it and you go Dawn Charm because it's something that's targeting you, and just making them cry would be so hilarious.
It is an absolute beauty of a card. Absolutely.
Though I'm also thinking of the scenario in which they're trying to like counter a mana tithe instead of just pay 1.
Nope.
No.
Nope. Gonna counter that mana tithe.
An
Sometimes
offer,
you got to be petty.
listen, sometimes an offer you can't refuse is just the flavor when you deserve.
You know, it's fair.
All right. And round 3, we have Brash Taunter versus Harvest Season.
Brash Taunter is a 4 and a red for a 1/1 goblin creature with indestructible. When it's dealt damage, it deals that much damage to target opponent. It also has 2 and a red, tap it. It fights another target creature. Harvest Season is a 2 and a green sorcery. Search your library for up to X basic land cards, where X is the number of tapped creatures you control, and put those cards onto the battlefield tapped. Then shuffle your library.
All right, Jacob, why don't you start us off here with Harvest Season?
All right. So I can hear everyone in the crowd right now. They're booing me. They're going, bro, just cast Cultivate or Kodama's Reach. You get one to your hand. You get to play blah, blah, blah. Listen to me, okay? I got 4 boys, right? I turn them sideways. The 4 boys, if they don't die, net me 4 lands. That has to be the most hilarious. Oh, why are you swinging with these 0/1s? Ha ha ha. I guess I'll just not block because it's funny. And then you go pay 3 mana on my second main. Give me 4 basics. Like, it's not a great card. I won't argue that. But it is a feel-good card.
Yeah, it's one of those cards that has very, very low floor, very high ceiling. Brash Taunter, though. In a format where a lot of people like to play out big creatures, sometimes you need to be able to punish them for that. And Brash Taunter, oh boy, does Brash Taunter deliver on that. I have had somebody face me with their Eldrazi decks while I was facing them with my Brash Taunter deck. That person swiftly lost that game. they could not keep up with the amount of damage that I was putting out with one Gabo boy versus their Aldrazis. Like, it is such a good card. Just such a fantastic card. And glad that it is a stuffy doll for a new age, as you can then target any one of your opponents. Because sometimes you can even make that deal with that Eldrazi player and say, hey, I'm not going to throw this damage at you, but I'm going to throw it at the problem that's over there. And we're square? We're square. And that person then realizes, that player is yeeting damage like it's going out of style.
Still ain't Guardian of the Gateless, though. I guess to add on to the point for Brash Hunter, though, Entangler on that boy.
Oh, man, the Guilty Conscious infinite combo.
All right, so I do like both of these cards. They definitely have positives and negatives to them. If I had $1 for every time that I've used a Path to Exile or Sellers to Plowshares on Brash Tanner, I could retire right now, and that would be great. But with that being said, with the versatility of being able to go after multiple people, and Stuffy Doll does hold a soft spot in my heart, I think Brash Tanner wins this round.
Brash Hunter!
And moving on to our final topic number 4, Penny for Your Thought Vessel, Not Everything is a 7. So, Joe, Jacob, I'm going to break you down a particular scenario that we see a lot. So, go into your LGS, trying to get into a normal pod. You're having this question, hey, scale 1 to 10, how powerful is your deck? We got 2 people in this pod. Player number 1 bought a Lord of the Rings pre-con, has been updating it using EDH Rec, finding some new rec cards recommended for it. It's mostly the pre-con, but there's definitely some powerful cards in there. They don't think that 6 is qualified. They're like, hey, 7 out of 10 seems fair. Not quite a CDH deck, not quite, at a pre-con level anymore. I'm going to say it's a 7. You have somebody else in the pod. Hey, I've got my Brago deck. I'm aware of CDH. I normally play in that kind of pod. I know that if it took this and went against a 10 or a 9, it would get absolutely smoked. It's got a lot of pet cards in there. I'm going to say mine's a 7 as well because I want this 2 notches down from CDH. Seems about fair where I'm at. So you have both these players believing that their deck is a 7 going into this game. Naturally, game unfolds. Brago deck's a lot stronger than the pre-con. Doesn't have a way to block the flying. Removal gets out of hand. Combos off to seal off the win. Player 1's upset, saying, hey, you brought a CDH deck to my meta. What happened? Brago player is upset, saying, like, hey, you brought a pre-con to a power level 7 game. What are you doing? Who's right? Who's wrong here? So I think the main problem you can break down with is we look at what is traditionally kind of everyone looks at is what is your power level between 1 and 10? So can you break this down a little bit for us, Jacob?
Yeah. So in recent times, we have had a lot of adaptations to this giant, overwhelming question of what are power levels, because for the longest time, everyone looked at a pre-con like it's a 5. And in our current day and age, that is not even close to the truth. And it's a very, very specific niche of decks that could even come out of the box that strong with minimal and they still need edits to be a 5 in what we are looking at in our current meta. So one of the ways we went to look at this is we found a chart that I guess we all conscientiously kind of agreed on. We looked at where we evaluated how we look at our own decks in this kind of light. So to sum it up, Levi, you want to go over each individual number for me?
All right. So I'm just gonna break down the normal 2-word for each number here. So your 1 is just gonna be a literal pile of cards that you would technically classify as a CDH deck or as a EDH deck. Number 2 is what's a win con. This might be your everyone sitting in a chair kind of deck or some kind of random power level. You have your normal pre-cons coming in at 3. This is kind of the earlier stuff where it was just kind of a pile of card, maybe had like 3 different themes you could build off of where the deck didn't really synergize together very well. You have your strong pre-cons, which is more your Warhammer, Lord of the Rings, Brothers War type of precons where they're a lot more synergistic. They work a lot better together. You have number 5, your upgraded precons. This is when we start adding some cards to the deck, maybe recommendations you saw on YouTube or EDH Rec or somewhere else, trying to make those a little bit better and taking out some of the cheaper cards for some more value. You have number 6, decks with a plan. These are they have a definite strategy using some pet cards. They're trying to minimize tapped lands that are coming in, but they still might have some. Next, you get to playing with power at number 7. This is going to be where we're trying to take out some of those pet cards. You might have some, but efficiency is more of the focus of what we're doing. Number 8, these are your borderline CEDH decks. These are the ones that are just on the right of the power level, but they're not quite going in worrying about CDH type meta issues, so they're not focusing on that at all. Tier 2, in my opinion, these are your CDH decks that are not showing up on tournament results. And CDH Tier 1 is going to be, these are the ones that are showing up in CDH tournament top 16s.
Yeah. Another really good important thing to distinct is the 10 categories can be even continuously, grouped up into 5 categories if you wanted to be really broad with how you describe something. So like 1 and 2 is unfocused. This is anywhere from a spectrum. These are the spectrums people tend to try to categorize our 1 through 10 on, and not what actually exists. This is the pre-notion that, a precon is a base 5, which, like I said, I don't think we feel is accurate. An unfocused is that 1 and 2. A focused, which most precons feel like they're focused, is in that 3 and 4 range, which is the next up category, into tuned, where you've taken the time, you've done a bit of your research. Optimizes, you've come to comprehend what it takes to actually do a lot of the things you want to do without having to put in cards you think don't get there just because you like them. Like Guardian of the Gateless is an example. Love the card, would never hit in an optimized deck. It's not physically possible. And then obviously competitive is all the 9s and 10s. This is the spectrum of everything you take to an actual tournament setting.
But all of my decks are about a 7.
Clearly.
Absolutely. So that's the problem we have. So
Even my CDH decks.
Yep,
About a
all
7.
7. So what everyone's saying their deck is, and I think a part of it is that if someone's put in a serious amount of time, they might over-evaluate how good their deck is for what the amount of work they put in. So this is where we get a lot of people that are in the casual spectrum saying that their deck is a 7, which the 7, as this list is showing here, is decks are largely refined down to just the best cards for their strategy. Perfect/nearly perfect land bases, multiple cheap tutors, highly efficient ramp draw, etc. Most decks become less generalist as they focus more heavily on their primary strategy. Expect to see lots of powerful staples. Higher budget decks are fairly common. So this is where they're, okay, we're going to take this deck super seriously. And I think you could have that case, but also there are some strategies that simply do not have enough support to move beyond a 7. That might just be their peak. The perfect example right now with Winds of the Eldraine coming out is the tap down strategy with Azorius. I don't know if there's enough cards out there at this particular point in time to exceed a 7, but I'm excited to see how it's going to go.
But there's a 4-card combo there. How could it not be past a 7?
Oh no, it's almost like if you think about how many pieces it takes to do a thing, that you might be not good enough to do the thing.
I'll make it work.
Yeah, okay.
There we go. So that becomes the issue here. And I think another factor that a lot of people aren't considering is everyone's experiences. So if I go into a local game store, because I like to play in a lot of different locations, see different metas, see different decks, kind of see what's going on, keeps it fresh for me. Mm-hmm. One of the places I go is more in a rural community where they actually banned commander damage, which is kind of interesting. I wish I would have known that before learning about that rule halfway through a game playing Voltron, but that's neither here nor there.
So
Still
weird.
a little salty.
It's very weird.
But the issue is that, when I went into this meta and I said, hey, I've got a precon, I've got a CDH deck with me, and I've got 8 decks in between. So like whatever power level we want to play at, I'm happy to accommodate. One of the people said like, hey, if you want to do a CDH deck, I've got my Rats deck with me. So the person was not playing Relentless Rats, and this deck he thought was a CDH deck because it technically could kill one person around turn 4 or turn 5. if that entire store expectation is that is what is a CDH deck, like a 9 or a 10, what a 7 is going to look like in their eyes versus my eyes is going to be very, very different. Where if I just give them a generic number, it's going to be nothing.
Another great example is we went to the convention in Charlotte, and we fought. It was Levi and I went to play Two-Headed Giant, and we brought a pair of decks that were a little higher scale, but they're nowhere near competitive. I would put these in the optimized because they are good at what they're trying to do, but they're not going to compete against something ready to bring the gas. And we played across from a pair of people who were a couple. They were they seemed like they knew what they were doing, but when we got into the gameplay, the guy got super upset. He pointed at my deck. He's like, "Oh my god! Like, of course you'd play CEDH in this environment with price support." And I was trying to be nice to him. I tried to explain. I'm like, I mean, I liked the strategy from your deck, but I'm going to keep it real with you. We didn't bring CEDH, and the CEDH decks we did bring, we specifically put away because you sat with us. You know. The scenario was really awkward because he was really upset and he didn't want to hear a lot of what we had going on. I was like, listen, in the real spectrum of things, the competitive version of the decks we would have brought would have ended this infinitely more intestinally than what we did bring to you.
Yep.
And I mean, these things definitely happen. Like, I mean, in the next round, we played, less competitive stuff, and we got blown out by more competitive decks. Like, that's just how it goes.
And then even when you break it down more, a competitive deck will function that way 9 times out of 10. But there's always going to be that 1 time out of 10 where it's just not going to be playing at that level because whether the pilot is not the most well-versed with the deck, or they just kept a hand that they thought was good that just immediately got blown out by another player playing a certain deck at the table, or their draws were just bad.
And I think this is possibly playing into one of the parts I think you were thinking about before, which is like boogeymen in Magic the Gathering. People, like anyone who sees Narset and has a panic attack.
So, and we'll definitely get into what I call the boogeyman factor at a later episode here. But the main issue that I see with power level is we're trying to quantify something that really can't be quantified. It's on a feeling. So that'd be like me asking you, Joe. Joe, like on a scale of 1 to 10, scientifically speaking, how beautiful is the Mona Lisa?
It's about a 7.
So you just can't do it. You can't, quantify this, and we're trying to put these numbers and specificity.
Speak for yourself. I just gave it a number. You asked me scientifically, give it a number. I gave it a number. It was 7.
You just said 7.
So another factor to this issue is that people quantify their deck being a 7 simply in a vacuum most of the time. A lot of people spend a lot of time, they build their deck, they slap all the stuff that's in there, they look at their synergies, and then they don't calculate for the possible things that get in their way, and they go, yeah, this is a 7 because I am able to do X, Y, Z. But they leave out the little nuance of I can do X, Y, Z when I'm unhindered.
Yeah. And in a different case, I had built a deck recently that should have at least been in the middle of that kind of range that we brought up in that list. And people took a look at that list and just rated it low because their independent meta for ranking it at the middle of a pack meant that they were running way faster and way higher removal than should be expected in like a middle of the pack deck. Like they were talking about putting in Red Elemental Blast and Pyroblast into a mid-level deck, which just blew my mind.
So, just for the audience here, what is Red Elemental Blast and Pyroblast?
They are, quote-unquote, clones of each other. They do essentially the same thing while not at the same time. You have one of them, because I actually forget which one is which. One of them specifically says counter target blue spell or destroy target blue permanent. The thing that you have to target is blue, versus the other one, which is counter target spell if it is blue, or destroy target permanent if it is blue, where it could target anything, but not necessarily do anything unless it was blue.
Gotcha. Okay. So why do you think that these would not be very good in casual pods?
Because it betrays a stronger narrative than what you're usually trying to do in like most casual games that I've played. And for the most part, those cards I have seen more used heavily in CDH, because in CDH, it is a heavily blue format. Whether it is just because you need counter spells, or you're trying to do a Thoracle combo, or just any good card in there, in especially Rhystic Study. Those cards being in the format makes you need to run both of those red counter spells or destroy spells to just, eke out your own advantage. But putting them into a more middle of the pack level pod can drastically change games against these certain decks being brought to the table.
It's another notion similar to that same vein of Krosan Grip versus Beast Within. So Beast Within, for anyone who's not super aware, it is the same cost as its comparison. They both cost 2 and a green. Krosan Grip says split second, meaning you can't put other things on the stack until it's done.
So could I counter it?
Nope. Can't counter it, but you get to destroy a target artifact or enchantment. Beast Within has destroy target permanent, so it can be anything on the board, anything of your choice that exists there, and they get a beast.
The controller gets a beast.
Yes. The person who had the thing you blew up. In 2 different types of metas, these could make or break the difference between you considering if one of them makes it a 7 and one of them doesn't. If you play a meta where there's not a lot of land hate, there's no Armageddons, there's no specific destruction on a lot of non-land permanents is all they target, and the one person who's dominating your table is someone who abuses something like Field of the Dead, or does a lot of like crazy shenanigans where they're using their lands as something way more than they're supposed to be.
I feel you adding me, Jacob. I feel it.
I mean, that's because he is, but it's fine.
Live on stream.
It's not my fault you put games on your phone and put me in this situation.
Oy.
Anyways, so for instances like players who dominate the table by a land, Krosan Grip would make you feel like your deck's at a 4 if that is the thing you have to pay attention to, versus a Beast Within that's going to be like, okay, it could blow up this thing, or we hit the Field of the Dead when it hits because we know it's coming, or, we anticipate having more not artifact or enchantments in our problems. If in a shop where creatures run supreme, your Krosan Grip is worthless.
Mm-hmm.
But
unless it's an Nyxbloom Ancient, then hey, that's an enchantment.
Yeah, very wonderful. Yeah. But like in certain situations where you go to a shop and you know the type of people you're playing with, suddenly your comprehension of what you need to do and what cards actually matter changes dramatically.
So at this point, we're looking at your local meta, determining how you perceive power, your past experiences, how you're perceiving a deck's power level. So it almost becomes more of an art versus science kind of debate. So when I'm doing a power level discussion or rule zero discussion, I think what I do is probably a little bit different than yours. I'm just kind of curious on what you guys try to do. If you're going to a new game store and you haven't played with any of these people before and you just don't know. Like, Joe, what do you normally like to do?
So I usually like to discuss strategies, which I know some people are hesitant to do only because, well, you're giving the game away. But if people are well versed on like the commander, you probably were already going to be giving the game away. And especially, and I learned this when I was in Philadelphia and sat down with a game with Rachel Weeks, and I told her I was bringing out my one creature prismatic bridge deck, and she made it a very good point when I said the one creature is a secret to put out that can drastically warp someone's interpretation of that deck, because if you're keeping that creature a secret, then it's only until it's too late for someone to have qualms with how that deck was being run. And that's why every time that I've sat down recently with my one creature prismatic bridge deck, I always tell people this is a Brash Taunter deck. It primarily runs a whole bunch of red board wipe spells, because that's one, how I control my way to not die, and two, be able to win with Brash Taunter. I also tell them that this is a pseudo Gates deck, because it is. Sometimes, because someone keeps Swords to Plowsharing a Brash Taunter, you kind of have an alternate win condition.
Hey, if Brash Taunter didn't want to get exiled, he shouldn't have gone on the field.
Man, that's not your prerogative. It's fine. Anyway, the end of the day is, if you're discussing the types of strategies, you can usually pinpoint how fast or slow a specific strategy can usually go. Like counters is usually in that like middle of the pack, depending on how that deck is built. But usually you're not going to see like a CDH counters deck. You're usually going to see a very nice optimized at the high end, and generally pre-con at the other end. But if you're saying, well, my strategy is Thassa's Oracle, that's usually CDH. And like there's usually no two ifs, ands, or buts about it. The only way that you're like making that not as strong is you're just probably not putting some tutors in the deck, and then you just explain there's no tutors in the deck. And it makes it a little bit harder, a little weird, but a little bit harder. And you can judge fairly off of that. Being open and honest about your strategy is not a bad thing. It usually can still just help people understand the game better, which for anyone, you usually want better understanding of the game that you're playing with other people. And it also just helps understand where everybody is coming from at that point.
Jacob, how do you normally go about power level?
So I approach this in a very, and now that I'm going to put this out into the universe, everyone I play with at our shop's going to look at me a little different, because they're going to realize I've done this to them. I start off every single game with someone I've never played with as a conversation piece. My whole thing at the beginning of this being a social format and like the communication of someone's day is more important to me than sitting there and the first thing I go being like, what's your power level? Like, it's not Dragon Ball Z here. But I start a conversation. I kind of figure out things they like to do. I start with what do you want to play? And I try to take what I think that deck's going to be. And I specifically play something in my mind that's supposed to be weaker than that. I always, like, if I look at something, let's say they pick out Brago. I know Brago's good. Brago himself does a number of things. I'm going to pick something I think is supposed to perform at least one, in my mind, a level or so lower than what that's supposed to perform at. And I'm willing to get washed at least the very first game to kind of grasp how they're thinking, what a lot of the lines they like to look at, how they perceive the game, and kind of evaluate, okay, so they picked Brago. They went for the infinite flicker line. They think this deck's an 8. They went through a bunch of 4-part combos. They don't have any tutors. Just dissecting everything I see, dissecting the decision making and going, okay. And then if they're willing to hear me out, have a conversation, be like, now that we've, played a little bit, these are, if you care to hear them, here's some of my thoughts. Like, here are some things I think you could possibly include. This is where I think this should be at what power level you're describing, if you are really there. And then if they hear me out, I then already know where they're at in their deck building. If they pull out another deck, I know to either go up or down respectively in my deck choices and I want to cater to them because I'm going to build something I enjoy. And to me, if I'm going to have a variety of options in my pool, I'm going to build something at your level that I'm going to enjoy playing. That's just part of how I function. That's what I think.
Okay, I like that. Definitely, kind of using the first game to kind of get a feel for it. I think that's good. Me personally, I try to fight art with art here, where I try to ask just kind of a general, so what kind of vibe of a game are we going for? And then, if depending on the person's experience can drastically alter how this conversation goes. If you have someone who's newer to the game, they'll say, well, I've got this, Frodo and Samwise pre-con deck. I'm like, okay. So, and then at that point, I'm going to open up the topic like, okay, have you done anything to that pre-con deck at this point? Have you made modifications? Yes. Was it all Lord of the Rings cards or were you just anything goes? Oh, just Lord of the Rings cards. Okay, so I know that you're building a updated pre-con, but from a selective pool. So in my brain, I'm probably going to try to find an updated pre-con or maybe just bring out a pre-con against that person. And then I'm probably going to try to notify the other people at the table like, hey, so we're doing like an updated pre-con thing here. So then they will be able to know to adjust and accommodate to that level as well. Versus if they say like, hey, I want to do a deck, I want to do a game where the stack matters. Okay, that might be more competitive. All right, so you're thinking more like, and I'll usually break it down into 3 very broad terms like high power, mid, or low. So, okay, I want to do a mid power. Cool. I'll know exactly what to go for at that point. So it's a mid power game where the stack matters, or it's a high power combat's important. Or maybe they want to do something where, I've got a deck that has a lot to do with the Monarch, so I want to make sure that the Monarch mechanic is relevant. Because it always stinks whenever you bring out a deck that really wants like combat damage to be firing back and forth, and you're going against like a combo, Storm, and then Stacks player where no one's really swinging at anybody.
Yeah.
So I usually try to get a gauge on just the general vibe and then accommodate accordingly because I'm in a position where I run a lot of different decks where I can kind of do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I will also say, and I don't know if either of you do this, I will also sometimes temper how I play a deck, which can sometimes bring the power level up or down in a game.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah. Every single time, sometimes the decisions you make can also determine a power level of a game you are playing.
A deck at a 3 is a terror if a player is a 9. And that is an issue people have because just like the example I gave earlier where we went to Two-Headed Giant, our decks were probably 6s. 6s or 7s. They were not high. But Levi and I operate those decks because we're so familiar, and it could probably make them feel like a 9 to someone who is completely unaware or uneducated. I could see the miscommunication, which is why I wanted to conversate that guy after the fact.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's up to the listeners here. We have 3 different ways to upgrade your game experiences by just having different conversations at power level. You can have kind of the spoiler talk, as I like to call it, with Joe's option. You can have the take one for the team with Jacob's strategy, or just kind of a vibe topic with mine. Any of these will be acceptable for you, and you can go from there. Of course, we are a community-oriented show here, so if you have any topics that you'd like to see covered on the show, send us an email to thoughtfesselShow@gmail.com, or you can look us up on Facebook or Twitter, also known as X, and we would be able to answer those questions on the show. We'll be happy to give you a shout-out as well.
Always happy to hear from people. You know, we like to hear some of the goofier stuff as well. Don't be shy with
Give us
the weird.
the jank.
The jank would be cool. I'm willing to dissect a more complex social economics. I'm not going to cut your curiosities into black and white, and Levi here is going to definitely cut them black and white.
I will, in fact, go into shades of purple.
Yeah, because you won't be breathing.
Well, on that
Okay,
cheery note, I think we're
shades of
gonna,
red then.
I think we're gonna wrap it up for the rest of the day. So again, this was the Thought Vessel. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope you have a good rest of your week.